Well, welcome. I'm SHAWN MILNE, filling in for Chad Booth, and you're watching The County Seat. On today's program, we're going to hear from 3 county officials with some previous city experience to find out the similarities, commonalities, and some differences between city and county management versus county oversight. So today we're joined by David ZOOK, Cache County Executive, Bob STEVENSON, Davis County Commission, and Tom TRIPP, Tooele County Council. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. So you all have some previous city experience before you came to the county. Tom, what was yours?
I was a city council member in Grantsville for about 11 years.
Oh, very good. And David, why don't we mix it up? What was yours?
I actually have a mix of both. I worked in county government in San Bernardino County, California for 15 years. And then the past 9 years, I was in city government as a city manager for Nibley City, and now I'm with Cache County.
And Nibley City was appointed, yes?
Yes, it was an appointed position as city manager.
Very good. And Bob?
So I was a Layton City Councilman for 3 terms, then served 2 terms as mayor of Layton City, and presently I'm a Davis County Commissioner.
Excellent. How many terms have you had as a Davis County Commissioner?
1. I'm in the back end of my first county commission seat.
All right, very good. So why don't we begin with you? What have been some of the commonalities that you saw, particularly as a mayor for a large city like that, with Davis County full-time commission? You guys are full-time, correct?
I think that the main thing is first of all, people are the most important element. We always have to remember that when it comes to government, there is nothing more important than the people we serve. But I do think that between a large city and also the county, especially the largest city in the county, is you get involved with a lot of things, transportation, actually education somewhat because of the school districts you work with, public works. I think one little difference is you do have the situation with your police force in a city, and then you have your county sheriff's office. The county sheriff's office is really a lot more entailed than what a city is, but I think those are some of the basic similarities between them.
Oh, very good. And Tom?
I've served as a council member in Grantsville City for a number of years. Then I was commissioner for a couple, and now I'm back to being a county council person. And it's, just this markation between the executive branch and the legislative branch is quite different. In Grantsville City, I was with a mature legislative bunch who kind of knew where their place was and understood how things functioned. In our new situation in Tooele County, we are finding our way a little bit. We're in a situation where we have an appointed manager, and the legislative body can choose to be as executive as they choose to be, which makes a blurry line that we're trying to find our way through.
Well, we'll come back to that. That is very intriguing for sure. And David, so with county, then city, and day-to-day at the city and now at the county, what are some of the similarities that you see?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just listening to a couple of the comments so far, there are very many similarities between them, but at the same time, some things are different. The services we provide, in some cases, we provide similar services like law enforcement. But then at the county level, there are some services that you would never see at a city level, like assessing property values or collecting taxes. We collect taxes for all of the agencies, including the cities. And the governance is different too, as was mentioned. My position is actually kind of unique, even in the state of Utah as a county executive. I'm kind of like the mayor of the county, but I'm also like a manager, similar to my city manager role before, where I oversee the day-to-day operations of the city. But at the same time, I'm the executive leader of the organization elected to that position. I guess if we're going to talk about governance also, that's probably one of the biggest differences, I would say, between city management versus government at the county level. At the city, all of the department heads answer to me as a city manager, and in some cities you answer directly to the mayor, some it's a city manager, so that varies from city to city. But in my role now, I have half a dozen department heads who are independently elected: the sheriff, the county attorney, the assessor, the recorder, the clerk, the treasurer. They all answer to the voters directly and not necessarily to the county council or the county executive. So that can be challenging. It requires diplomacy. It requires really working together.
That's an excellent point. And a great place for us to stop for our first commercial break. You're watching The County Seat. Join us and we will continue our conversation about the differences and similarities between city and county government. Stay tuned. Well, welcome and thanks for coming back to The County Seat. We are again joined by David ZOOK, Bob STEVENSON, and Tom TRIPP. So right before the commercial break, David mentioned that the governance structure between cities and counties differs in as much as counties have several other elected officials. Tom, where you alluded to in the first segment that Tooele is undergoing a slightly different governance change, albeit it's not with the other elected officers, what have you noticed about that difference from your experience with the city?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic where you've got, as a commissioner, you've got executive and legislatives. Not only are you managing specific departments, you also have the ability to change budgets, change policy. Now, as a legislative person, we're mostly working with policy and still have budget, but we don't have that executive function. And we're depending on our manager to make good decisions. And that form of government at least gave us the ability to pick a good hardcore manager to do the executive function, where sometimes you just elect popular people to do those things.
Well, let me throw something out. This is one of the situations that I've seen that I think can create a few problems. In the city, under city government, there's someone in charge. And even though a commissioner has executive power, there still are, in our form, we still have three commissioners. And so without two, there's really not executive power unless there's at least two of you that are willing to support what's there. And I've kind of thrown this out before in the fact that if you turn around and you take a county under the three commission form of government, who's in charge? Because in a sense, there's nobody in charge. And yet when you move back into the city and you've got the city manager, the mayor situation there, you do have leadership as far as it goes. And so I see a little bit of a problem, Tom, as you say that, because you really do not have the executive in a three-member commission as we have.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I've seen has been the most common source of conflict in local government, at least within the elected officials, between elected officials and staff, is role conflicts where it's not really clear who's in charge, who should be making the decision, or maybe it is clear but people are overstepping those bounds and trying to make a decision when they're not. Either they're the mayor and they're trying to be a council member trying to be a mayor, or they're a staff member trying to be an elected official, or an elected official trying to do what a staff member should do. And I think that's probably one of the best things we can do as elected officials is know our role and stick to our role. If we try to step over those lines, that's when we start having conflict.
Well, I think that's really true. And in that three-member form, if you have two on any topic, you've got a lot of power there.
That's right.
And it can be abused relatively easily. When you've got a bigger council, you at least have to have more people on your side to head off in any direction.
Well, and Tom, I totally agree with that, because under the three commission member that type of governance is, again, if two people are sticking together, you control the entire county. Whereas if you have a council that an executive has to answer to, you still have to get that approval if it's something that's outside your wheelhouse with what you're allowed to do. So that's a big difference I see between the cities.
What about this little grenade in the middle of the table in the conversation, though? What about the founders having the vision for all those other elected officials that at a city, albeit the city doesn't independently, at least in Utah, assess its own taxes, right? That's done at the county assessor level. What about that checks and balance so that you don't really just have two that are controlling certain aspects? I mean, because having been there in that role, right, I do appreciate what you're saying and I can attest to that. But there are certain day-to-day processes that it affects the average citizen where maybe because of those other elected officials, they are the check and the balance, where it doesn't come from a deliberative body like a council or parliament or Congress. It is somewhat housed in some of those other constitutional officers.
Sean, that's something I really like about our form of government in Cache County. We have a council executive form that I think more closely mirrors the form you see at the national level, at the state level, and even the city level with a mayor and a council, where you have that separation of powers between the executive branch and the legislative branch, with the council being the legislative branch and in our case, the executive being the executive branch. And I think that's good because there are distinct roles, there are distinct distinct things that need to happen. And like I said earlier, sometimes people try to cross over. Sometimes people in the legislative branch try to go and execute, and sometimes people in the executive branch try to go and legislate. And there are appropriate times. For example, as the executive, or a mayor could do this as well. They can push legislation. They can introduce legislation. They can push for their legislative body to adopt things. I think more often what you see as a problem is legislators trying to direct staff and push things on the executive side.
Let me take a little counter on that, David. In a case where you've got other elected officials in your county, when the heat's on, the commissioners take it all. You never see the clerk or the treasurer or the assessor stand up and say, darn it, I'm in charge of this and I'm doing it that way. That just never happens. So if there's any heat on, if there's no accolades to be earned, they stay really quiet.
That's a really great segue for coming back from our next commercial break. So again, you're watching The County Seat. Thank you for joining us. Stick with us, and we're going to continue this little bit of a fiery conversation. We'll be right back. All right, and we're back to The County Seat. And we're discussing the differences and similarities between city and county government on today's panel. Bob, I'd cut you off just before the commercial break, and you were about to talk about one of those differences between other elected officials, I think, and the county executive.
Yes, as we have to understand is that there are a number of different elected positions. And when these people come into these positions within county government, realistically, the county commission, the county executive does not have power over those people. They're overseen by the people themselves as far as it goes. And sometimes when you're trying within county government to put programs together, bring the whole team together, there can be people in these elected positions who can balk at the idea. They don't want to do it. They don't want to be part of it. And really there's nothing you can do. But where at the city level, and I can use the finance person at the city level and the clerk auditor in a sense at the county level, is that the city manager, mayor can control what goes on at the city and what is expected, whereas in the county level, you can't. The clerk auditor has the autonomy to do what he wants within his own department. And I think these are some of the things that can make county government a little more difficult, or it can create a teamwork effort that can be very good. So
that's an interesting sort of almost bait that I don't know if any of us are going to take on today's program about one county that's having that dialogue right now about bringing the budget into the county commission office. So we'll just leave that there for now. David,
well,
is there
I wanted
something
to
you
follow
want to
up on Bob's comment, because it does, I think, lead you, having these department heads who really don't answer to the council, the commission, the executive, they answer directly to the voters. I think it creates a dynamic where the other elected officials are forced to use the power of persuasion, are forced to lead in a way where they have to invite those other leaders to come on board with them. And it's not a dictatorship. You can't go in there and say, you will do this, and this is the way that it's going to happen. And I actually kind of like that, because I really feel like that's how it should be with all of our departments. The departments that do answer to me, and I can hire and fire that department head, I like having that example of being more diplomatic, of working with them in a way where I'm inviting them to change, where I'm inviting them to get on board with our priorities.
Interesting. Tom, what's been your experience with that? You've been there now for a couple of years, and
it's a really interesting topic. Let's say you are having a problem with one of your other electeds. From a council standpoint, what's your position? Well, you can set policy. How do you enforce it? Do you use your draconian power and cut their budget? Said, well, okay, Mr. Treasurer, you don't want to do that? We'll do with 2 less people in your budget then, goodbye. And no one's taken those sorts of steps, but it's always that's the stick you've got in most ways.
So I think that one of the things in all levels of government that plays into the success that we have within this country, and that is teamwork. And I believe what David has pointed out here is very key, is that you do have to, and I think whether you're the mayor, whether you're the county level, is building a atmosphere of teamwork is what helps create whichever government along. Obviously, on the national level, we can see that there's not a lot of teamwork, and if there was, maybe things would move along a lot better. And so, you know, countywide, especially because of the number of elected people, it does become very important that you learn to work together if you're going to accomplish what needs to at the county level.
I like that idea. So let's segue from that to how counties work with cities rather than what I think a lot of folks misinterpret to mean that cities are somehow subordinate to counties. You know, I fielded a number of calls when I was in that role at the county about what folks living in a city boundary might expect me to be able to then feed back and say, you know, almost like that draconian measure you mentioned, Tom, well, this is what you shall do. And it's not set up like that, somewhat intentionally. So there needs to be some teamwork. And one of you, I forget which, alluded to it with the school district, right? I think it was you, Bob, that said, you know, at the city, you had to work with the school district. The county, you still have to work with the mosquito abatement district, school district, fire district. So tell us a little bit about how that teamwork between these two different entities serves the public.
Yeah, I'll talk about that, Sean. And this is something I have seen there's confusion about. I've only been in office just over 2 months now, and I've had several people say, oh, so does this mean the mayors all answer to you? Or does this mean that you're over the schools as well? And maybe it's a little more confusing in our county because the school district and the county have the same name. But they are separate. The county's separate from the cities. They're separate corporations. They don't answer to us. We can't tell them what to do. However, there are many opportunities for us to partner together, and we have in our county a number of examples where we have partnerships between cities and the county to provide services, and we do that in public safety. I think most often our sheriff's office provides police services for most of our cities in our county, actually. We provide fire services in partnership with several of our cities. We have library services that are partnered. We have solid waste that actually is something that the county has authority over, but has partnered with one of the cities to actually do the operations. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to partner together to provide services to our residents.
Excellent example.
And maybe swinging back to that conflict or teamwork, as Bob was alluding to, we have frequent meetings, what we call the department and elected heads meeting, and it gives you the ability with good communication to have enough momentum that people can get swayed by the overall direction that everyone wants to go to. If you don't have that frequent communication, we also make it a point to meet with our mayors, and our council of government has kind of changed directions and attitude a little bit over the last couple of years, where that is another way to use joint influence and joint momentum to turn the tide one way or another.
We've worked as a commission very, very diligently to create a teamwork with all the mayors and city managers throughout the county. Davis County is a little bit unique to the rest of the state in that we are the smallest. We're also the most urban county. We have very little county ground that's left that isn't incorporated. And so we work very closely as far as all the things we do with the mayors and the commission and also the school district. We tie in very, very neatly with the things that do, and we found the success that we've been able to have within Davis County has been amazing with everything that we've accomplished in the last couple of years.
I love that. So when we come back from the commercial break, we'll flesh out a little bit more about this communication being key to the teamwork's success. You're watching The County Seat. We'll be right back. Well, welcome, and thanks for coming back. We are on The County Seat with our great panelists today, and right before the commercial break, we're talking about teamwork and communication. And I think that's key, right? Because all of us that run for elected office want to be as accessible as possible to those that we're here to serve. And communication is key to having that teamwork. So what do you think is the best way for citizens that are watching today's program to go about that? Should they be going to a city council meeting, a county commission meeting? What say you is the best way for folks to get involved?
Yeah, I'll address that. I have a couple of ideas. One is they probably want to keep their eye on both because they're both going to affect you. Obviously, if you live in a city, they're a little closer to you. They affect your life a little bit more directly in most cases than a county. And if you're in an unincorporated area, that's not an option. You only have the county. And like in my county, I'm their mayor. I'm the only mayor they have. And they should watch both. I would keep an eye on both. And there's really a great tool the state has developed in recent years to do that. It's the public meeting notice website. Every one of those bodies has to post their agenda, they have to post their minutes. You can get all of that information, pmn.utah.gov, public meeting notice website. They can just Google it. You can subscribe to a body. You'll get an email when they're having a meeting. They'll send you the agenda. And it just takes 30 seconds to look at that and see, oh, what's the city up to? What's the county up to? And you might say, I'm not interested in any of those. Or you might say, I'm going to that meeting, or I'm emailing my mayor about that.
Excellent.
From my perspective, I believe that if you live within a city, your first step is always going to be towards a city. That's your local government, and that's where the connection should be made as far as that goes. If you're in an unincorporated area, then obviously the county is there. I do agree with David. What we really need to do is have the citizens be able to be more involved. We'd love to see more people run for office. We'd love to have people tune in. I think most of us, our sessions are live now if people want to watch them. And I think the websites are there that have all kinds of information as far as it goes. But I think the main thing that all citizens should do is to be involved. They can say things to us that we may not understand that can move things forward, that can help them and the rest of the county and the cities involved.
That's a great point. Thanks, Bob.
Communications, two-way street. In our meetings, we allow public discourse, just free discourse, both at the start and the end of our meeting to allow the public to express things. I prefer to get the information from them before we vote on something than after. That's my preference. In these days of technology, I think most cities and counties are now putting their full packages of information out so the public can see it. And I've seen that to be a helpful thing. So you get a more educated or less inflamed population because they can see what you're doing. You're not sneaking up on them and springing something on them in the meeting. So communication's two-way. We have to spoon feed it a little bit, or at least make it available, as Dave says. The public meeting website's great, and we post on our own county and city websites in our county.
Any other alternative methods?
Social media is huge. Everybody's on it, and cities and counties should be on it too.
I love that. I mean, to the extent that this program, and by you turning in today, just proves that you want to know more. And if you're watching this, we're clearly speaking, to you and preaching to the choir. Communication is key. And thank you, folks, for coming. Gentlemen, we really appreciate your time on our program today to help communicate those points, the similarities and differences between cities and counties. So you've been watching The County Seat. Tom, Bob, and David, thanks again. We really appreciate it. And remember, folks, that the city and county closest to you, the government closest to you, is the best and most responsive. So be sure to take these gentlemen up on their suggestion. Tune in and also watch The County Seat on our various social media platforms. Be sure to follow us. You've been watching The County Seat. I'm Sean Milne, filling in for Chad Booth. Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you for watching The County Seat. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications to keep up to date on the program and happenings around Utah.